Welcome to another Buildalong, and this one is on the Stanley Cup video. So if you haven't seen this video, this was what we call a certified banger. This went nuclear on Instagram, 4.5 million views, crazy engagement. TikTok, it has 1.2 million views. Even YouTube, it has YouTube Shorts, it has 42,000 views. Snapchat, almost 100,000 views. So this, whenever you get a video that goes crazy on every platform, there's something to be studied in the script and in kind of the format of the video. So that's why I'm making a build along. The first thing I'm gonna do is play the video. Then I'm gonna go through the script itself, and I'm gonna walk you through like exactly how I built the script, why I chose different lines in different places, why I chose to sequence it a certain way, kind of how I did the research for it. Then I'm gonna open up the edit and I'm gonna show you a couple things in the edit in terms of how I stacked the edit to give us the best chance for success. Now, like I've said before in previous versions of these, a lot of what makes this work is a little bit of taste, a little bit of practice, a little bit of Monica, a lot of reps, and you never really know when one's gonna take off. In this case, I think the Stanley Cup phenomenon is so inherently viral. There's so much debate on either side that if you put out a half decent video on that, it's gonna cause this chaos in the comments, which is what spurs that viral loop. So some of this was like right topic, right time, but I think there's a lot that I did in the construction of the script and the story that helped make this go. The first thing we'll do is let's watch the video. It's gonna be about 90 seconds and we'll do that now. Something crazy is happening with Stanley Cups.
You ever seen one of these?
Stanley Cup.
Stanley Cup.
Stanley Cup, racking up 6.7 billion views.
This 40-ounce Stanley Quencher has become the Louis Vuitton of drinkware. It's a status symbol. New releases are selling out in seconds. People are flipping them for hundreds on eBay. Stanley, the company, 10x'd its revenue in 4 years off this single product. But the real question is, how'd they do it? How did Stanley Cups go from a construction worker's thermos to the dream Christmas gift?
I got a Stanley!
It's a wild story. So in 2019, Stanley was actually about to discontinue the cup. But this group of mom bloggers, the Buy Guide, knew they were making a huge mistake. So they cut a special affiliate deal with Stanley to bulk order 5,000 cups with a twist. Stanley had to make them pastel colors. Those 5,000 cups sold out in 5 days and completely changed their philosophy on design. But it gets even better. A few months ago, Stanley had the burning car moment. It's a video of a woman's car completely charred, with her Stanley Cup being the only thing that survived, with ice still in it. It went ballistic on TikTok, 94 million views. And the Stanley CEO, he's smart. He used to be the CMO at Crocs. He replied saying the company would buy her new car. Viral again. And that $30,000 car was worth millions in impressions. The key here is that Stanley has become masters of opportunistic virality and limited edition collabs. And if I'm them or any other brand, I'm leaning even heavier into rare and exclusive. Somebody gets to be the status symbol in every category. And for drinkware, Stanley's king. Okay, perfect. What I want to do is I'm sharing my screen on the script and we'll go through that in a second, but I want to actually go below. Now, on every video, I don't do this. I don't always kind of research several different sources and document those threads. But in the Stanley case, there were so many interesting things to piece together that I wanted to kind of write down what were the threads or like themes of the video that I could kind of put together as puzzle pieces. So it all started out with picking the Stanley Cup phenomenon as a topic. So I saw this a bunch of places. Usually when you're trying to train your signal, anytime you see something come up over and over and over that intrigues your interest, especially if it's from multiple angles, like I saw a news article, I saw a tweet thread on it, I saw a couple things on TikTok, anytime it's coming from multiple places, that should signal to you that there's something interesting, or at least there's a movement happening. So that's how I kind of picked the Stanley Cup as an idea. The next step is kind of like, how do I frame that story? I call it story frames or lenses. So there's different interesting things. You could take here's how Stanley Cup got here from a historical perspective. So like, here's where the brand went. Here's where the brand is today. That's, I would say, like a 4 out of 10 interesting, but there's some little nuggets that are helpful to include in there. So that's one story frame. Another story frame is kind of like the TikTokification of Stanley. So the stat I saw that really popped out at me is that over the last 4 years, from 2019 to 2023, Stanley grew revenues from $70 million to $750 million, a 10x. That just does not happen. If you're in business, you know that does not happen. To go 10x on a commodity water bottle product is kind of insane. So another angle would be like break down the business strategy, what they did from a marketing and content perspective. Okay, so there's a piece there. The third is just like play into the sensationalization on TikTok of the viral moment. So like storytell around the actual content that was created and so on. So the idea is like find these unique story frames and figure out how the pieces fit together. So if you're looking at the screen now, You can see that. So there was this video where this lady's car completely burned to crisp, but she reached in the car and pulled out the Stanley jug. She shook it and there was ice and water still in it. That's how like impenetrable the steel is that the cup is made out of. That video got 100 million views on TikTok. So I knew I wanted to use that in some way. So that link's here. Then there's a response video from the Stanley CEO where he was like, yo, this is crazy. We're gonna pay for your new car. So that video went crazy. So that's here as well. I found those on TikTok. Then there was this video. So I have Stanley invented in 1913. This is kind of like a historical, more like a CNBC, actually it might be from CNBC, breakdown of like, here's the timeline. Stanley was started in 1913 to do this and they evolved. So more of like historical context. But really what you're looking for when you're making videos, you need B-roll. So one way to approach it would be I have a talking head shot and then all of my like other clips are like me in my house with a Stanley water bottle. But it's kind of hard to make videos like that unless you have either the space to do it, the set to do it, the products to do it, or where it even makes sense, right? Unless I was talking about a review of the cup, it doesn't really make sense for all the B-roll to be me holding it. So what I need is other B-roll on the internet that Stanley cups are featured in. So what I find is best is to go to YouTube or TikTok and you can use those videos as source material for your video. So as I keep going down these notes, and I just wanted to call these out because I don't always do this, but it's helpful to see the different frames. So I have like, here's how much the Stanley costs. There's this little nugget here where Stanley tried to stop selling the cup in 2019, but then there was this group of mom bloggers that negotiated a deal to keep them doing it. That's like a really interesting nugget. Those mom bloggers bought 5,000 cups and they sold out right away. That's kind of a piece to that story. Here's the crazy Stanley ad of the car burning. People are flipping them on eBay for like 4x the cost. Kids, I heard this from my wife. She talked to her boss who has a 10-year-old daughter. And when she went to her parent-teacher conferences, they said one of the two things that's causing the most stress amongst the 10-year-old girls is not having a Stanley Cup, which is insane on its own. So I like put that little nugget in there. Fans are lining up the releases are selling out in Target. So I have that. So you can start to see like, I don't have too much here. Here's the 70 million to 750 million, but these are all like little nuggets, little puzzle pieces that I can use to construct the final story. Okay, so let's go up to the actual script itself. Now, the first thing, and I've said this before, when you look down this script, what you should see is kind of like a jagged edge, because that implies that you have a varying length in the pace of your sentences. The way videos go viral is that the audio of the speech or the music sounds soothing to someone's subconscious mind. It sounds weird to say that. Like, it's going to sound weird to hear that. You don't want every sentence to be the exact same length because it gets monotonous, boring, and it's not soothing. You don't want every sentence to be a run-on because it becomes harder to follow. It will create stress. But you also don't want every sentence to be super choppy and short because it will be hard to add detail and like to really describe the situation. So what you want is this like jagged edge as you look down. To start out, I started with something crazy is happening with Stanley Cups. Now, I have this theory and I proved it again today in my video today. If you have a throwaway line that doesn't give any context, like you say, you're never going to believe this, and then you go in, usually those don't do that well because the attention span on these videos is so short that in the first line, in the first 3 seconds, you have to kind of tell somebody what this is about. And you can help reinforce that with imagery, which we'll get to in the edit, but you really got to get to the point. So something crazy is happening with Stanley Cups. That's like as straightforward as it can possibly be. Now, in this video, I had like this vision for this video where I wanted to try a new skill that I had never done before. And that was flashing to this like news compilation where they were talking about Stanley. And I had this like vision in my mind of like something crazy is happening with Stanley Cups. And then it like fades to black, it fades back in. And in the news clips, it's like Stanley Cups, Stanley Cups are crazy, right? Like you see this on professionally made videos. So I wanted to try this. So I just put like a little placeholder in here for that. You know, I didn't have to do anything in recording the script. We'll talk about it in the edit, but I think that actually led to a lot of retention in the first 5 seconds. So I had that. Then I said, this 40-ounce Stanley Quencher has become the Louis Vuitton of drinkware. So now this is something I picked up from my guy, Ram. His name's Ram Raviv on Instagram. I talked to him. He's a really smart content guy. And he said, one of the things you want to do is kind of like, you want to borrow from well-known brands, either brands, celebrity, pop culture, because if the story you're talking about is, let's say, a 5 out of 10 notable, but you can use somebody who's 8 or 9 or 10 out of 10 notable as a frame, even if it doesn't have to do with your story, that kind of amplifies or broadens the relatability to the people that are listening. So in this case, I use Louis Vuitton. Louis Vuitton is more widely known than Stanley. So it creates this like interesting halo effect where if you hear the word Louis Vuitton, you're like, oh, I don't really know this Stanley Cup thing, but I do know Louis Vuitton. So like it creates this match in your brain that makes you want to keep listening. Now, in this case, Louis Vuitton, it did relate to the video because I was talking about how Stanley is this like elevated luxury brand in drinkware, kind of making a joke and jest that it's like Louis Vuitton. Obviously, it's a water bottle, so it's not the same as like a $3,000 purse, but you get the point. So I said, this 40-ounce Stanley Quencher has become the Louis Vuitton of drinkware. So in that sentence, I'm trying to capture anybody who knows what the Stanley Quencher is, so I call it out by name. Saying 40 ounces, kind of sensationalizing how big the cup is. I'm going to show the cup on the screen at the same time, but then I'm saying Louis Vuitton because I want anybody who has a mind for luxury and this idea around branding and luxury branding and cult followings, I want those people to be interested. That's who I'm targeting here. So that's why I said it like that. Now, based on the way I structured this in terms of like opening line, kind of news compilation, this is like a pseudo first line because by the time you watch the news compilation, the pacing of the story is reset. So this first line also needs to be telling people what it is. This 40-ounce Stanley Quencher has become the Louis Vuitton of drinkware. That could have stood alone as the first line, and so that's why it works. Now, after that, I hit with these quick punches. Again, I have a pretty long sentence. The 40-ounce Stanley Quencher has become the Louis Vuitton of drinkware is a long sentence. So you need to give people more context quickly and speed up the pace and the rhythm in their mind. So it's a status symbol. New releases are selling out in seconds. People are flipping them for hundreds on eBay. You can start to hear how I'm building the cadence of the words. And I'm creating this like subtle tension in the story because it's going to come to a head where I share like the main conflict. So you know, and hopefully this is interesting. I'm kind of going into like the psyche of how I'm building this up. In the moment as I'm writing it, I'm not going into this much detail of like, oh, I need a tension building line that's 5 words long because it's not like that. This all kind of comes out, but what you want to do is create these patterns and frames in your mind for what right is so that as you're writing the script, these things are kind of like second nature to you. So it's a status symbol. New releases are selling out in seconds. People are flipping them for hundreds on eBay. Stanley, the company, 10x its revenue in 4 years off this single product. All of this is kind of like adding up to like, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit. Like every line leads to the next line. And you're like, what? You're like on the edge of your seat trying to understand. And that's why I've basically got you 15, 20 seconds in with 5 or 6 lines that are really interesting. Like you're interested in what this even is if you haven't heard this story. So then I hit the first major head fake conflict kind of like resolution point. Now all of the context that I've delivered up to this point comes to a head right here where I said, but the real question is how'd they do it? Because if you're watching this and you're listening to these crazy facts, Louis Vuitton of drinkware, selling out everywhere, people flipping them for hundreds of dollars, if you're listening to these facts, you're asking yourself, well, how'd they do that? Like that's what you should be thinking in your head. So when I deliver that line, but the real question is how'd they do it? In your head, you're kind of like, yes, exactly. Tell me how they did it. Like you're almost like, it's like we're having a conversation and it pattern matches what you believed. And the whole point of these videos and how you retain people is you want to give them information they haven't heard before, support that information with facts that are kind of like confirmatory to their mind or even contradictory, but like get them to keep listening. And then you want to pattern match with what they believe. So if you come in with the opposite, it's still like interesting, but if you pattern match with what someone believes, especially if you're asking a question, they'll keep listening. So like I said, in this case, they're going to ask how'd they do it? And so that's what I said. Now, I asked the question again, I obviously framed it for emphasis. So like, but the real question is how'd they do it? How did Stanley Cups go from a construction worker's thermos to the dream Christmas gift? I specifically said that twice because I wanted to emphasize this is like a crazy story. And I had this clip of this girl I found in the research that was like, I got a Stanley, yeah! And she's like screaming in like a hilarious way.
I got a Stanley! Yeah!
It's a wild story. So I wanted to tee up the dream Christmas gift so that she could scream and then I could drop the beat right after because like I just think that would sound good. So that's why I said it a second time. So I said, it's a wild story. So then that whole part was the setup to like get you interested in the idea that Stanley Cups are in this crazy trend state that is hard to believe. All of that information, maybe I could have cut a couple sentences, but all of that information is helpful to kind of build this get you to the apex of the conflict, which is like, why did they do this? From here, we're headed back down the mountain of like conflict. Now this is where it enters like the second act of the story. You kind of want, once you're beyond the kind of like hook stage, you want to give conflict or give context, add a little conflict. Give context, add a little conflict to keep them interested. It's a little bit of a dance. So I'll show you what I mean. So we'll keep going. In 2019, Stanley was about to discontinue the cup, but this group of mom bloggers, the Buy Guide, knew they were making a huge mistake. So that's a little context. They're about to discontinue it, a little conflict. But there's these mom bloggers didn't want that to happen. So it's a dance. So you're like, okay, well, why? Every time I say but or therefore or like some head fake word, you're like, well, why did that happen? It kind of like piques your interest. So we'll keep going. So they cut a special affiliate deal to bulk order 5,000 cups with a twist. So now, see, the with a twist, that's another like, but wait, that's another head fake. So I give you a little context, a little conflict. Stanley had to make them pastel colored. Now, you probably weren't expecting me to say that. I said, but with a twist. You were probably expecting something like they had to pay up front or they had to guarantee the money, right? Like something like that. So when I give you a piece of context that you weren't expecting, it also gets you off balance. It gives this extra point of interest. So we'll keep going. Those 5,000 cups sold out in 5 days and helped completely change Stanley's philosophy on design. Again, that's context. Is that going to retain somebody? No, but it's kind of interesting to hear like, oh, it sold out really quick. And like that actually reinforced why the company made a change. Then I go, but it gets even crazier. So again, another conflict. This whole thing is a dance between context and conflict. I don't always do the conflict this frequently. Like if you're following the pattern, it's kind of like 1 and 1, 1 and 1, 1 and 1. It just so happened that the way I told the story this time, it worked out that way. And that may be an insight. And so what you want to do in this process is like, you make videos, some flop, some hit, some go crazy. On the ones that go crazy, you want to look back at what you did and be like, are there any insights here that I'm overlooking that help explain why this performed better than everything else? So as I'm going through this, it's actually helpful to me because I haven't looked at it in this much detail since I made it last week. And it's actually helpful to see, okay, 1 and 1, 1 and 1, 1 and 1. That's much quicker than I would have thought to have done. But hey, like that might be with short form and like the cocaine mind, that might be what you need to keep somebody's attention. So we'll keep going. We're getting to the end here. So the but it gets even crazier is kind of like the second major, head fake conflict moment. So if you were to draw this on a graph, it's kind of like starting at 0, going up to the first conflict moment, going down for this little lull of like context and conflict, back up to a second peak. We're now at the second peak and we're going to start heading down for the resolution. So the resolution is, a few months ago, Stanley had the burning car moment. It's a video of a woman's car completely charred, but her Stanley Cup being the only thing that was still survived with ice still in it. Again, little context, but the cup was still survived. That's conflict. So the same kind of pattern. It went ballistic on TikTok, 94 million views. Their CEO replied saying the company was going to buy her a new car. Viral again, and millions of dollars worth of impressions. Now, all that is context, but at this point, you're like, sucked into the story. I knew that was going to work because that video has 94 million impressions. So like if you just show that video and talk about what happened the same way the woman did, it's going to be sensational again. And we're headed towards the end. The key here is that Stanley has become masters of opportunistic virality and limited edition collabs. This is where I kind of like infuse my own little, like business strategy nomenclature, which kind of makes it a signature Kallaway video. So at this point, I'm probably starting to lose people. Like if you look at the retention curve, we're like a minute and 15 in and people are probably like, okay, like I get it. It's pretty crazy. So, I could have ended it right there, but I wanted to add a little extra sauce. So the last 2 lines, and if I'm them or any other brand, I'm leaning even more heavy into rare and exclusive. Now that's like my advice for the brand. So again, this last couple lines is like my extra business. This is what makes it signature. Like I'm adding the business strategy. I'm giving a recommendation for the brand, etc. Now the last line, this is key. You need the last line to be a banger. Almost as good as the first line. Because if it isn't, people will, people's energy is waning. And if you just let them wane off, they're not going to share it. They're not going to like it. The last thing they remember is the last line. So you need the last line to be an absolute banger. So when they see it, they're like, oh, wow, that was a really good video. I'm going to share it. So the last line here, somebody gets to be the status symbol in every category. And for drinkware, Stanley is king. Now the last line, there's a little magic with trying to make it a banger. You kind of want to think of it like a hook. I relate this to in baseball. The 9 hitter is not always the worst hitter on the team. You have 9 people. If you don't know baseball, sorry for this metaphor, but if you know baseball, you have 9 people in the lineup. You don't always put your worst hitter at 9. You put your worst hitter at like 7 or 8. 9 is almost like a pseudo leadoff man, because when you get to the bottom of the order, you want the 9th person to have a high on base percentage so that they can set the table for the top of the order. When you watch these videos, they auto loop. So the last line is like the 9 hitter. You want that to be a banger so it sets the table for the first line. I don't really try to do the thing where you like perfectly time the end of the video so that it's like tricks you into watching it again. I don't do that. But you want it to be like a dope last line. Okay, so that's kind of a summary of the thought process. Let me know in the feed, respond, shoot me a DM. Like, did you like the way I went through this? Was this helpful? I'm talking pretty quick because I'm trying to make this video tight, but hopefully that was helpful to like kind of see the strategy and thought around each line and kind of the process. So keep me posted on how you think that went. I'm going to jump into the edit part right now. All right, here we go. This is the second half of the build along for the Stanley Cup video. This is the edit. What you're looking at is Premiere. If you don't know Premiere, that's completely fine. It's actually way less complicated than it looks. Now, I'm not going to go through and explain every little single thing because Roberto and I are working on a super comprehensive course for short form video that it'll take a few months to put together because we're trying to make it the best possible thing, but that'll include every single little thing about what you do, how to edit, how to maneuver. So here, I'm going to try to make this quicker and just explain my thinking throughout different pieces of the edit. What you see here is this is the final video up here on the screen in the upper middle. The bottom is the timeline. So everything below this thicker gray line where my cursor is drawing, everything below in green and like there's a couple things in blue, that's audio. And we'll explain that in a second. Everything above that gray line is video. Now, the way the video works is whatever's on the top, it's kind of like layers of pieces of paper. So if you had 3 layers of paper, the only one you're gonna see is the top one, unless there was like a little bit that it wasn't covering, then you would see the second one below. So that's exactly how Premiere works. So the way I do these videos is I'll start with the full screen recording. What you're seeing here, which is just me, this is what I start with. And I go line by line by line. I have my script up, I'm looking in the camera, I'll say line number 1, I'll say line number 1 a couple times, I'll go to line number 2. So I have that. And that basically looks like this. So I'm not gonna have the audio pipe through because it's a little distracting, but this, or I guess I'll turn it on.
Crazy is happening with Stanley Cups. Something crazy is happening with Stanley Cups. Something crazy is happening with Stanley Cups.
So basically I'm doing that just in case I like make a sound in the microphone that I can't get rid of, or just to test different intonation styles. And so I start with that. Then I chop all the dead space out of that. I actually use a plugin called Autopod Jump Cut Editor to actually remove all of the spaces. And what I'm left with is chopped line by line by line. So I go through the line by line by line and I pick my best delivery of each line. And basically what that looks like is this is highlighted, for example. This is a single line and there's 2 blue bars and 1 green. So the one that's highlighted, you can see 1 blue bar on the top is highlighted with that green. That is my full screen version. So this is what you see on the screen right here. It's me full screen. Now the one below is half screen, because the way I like to do these videos is I don't have multiple cameras yet that I can cut to make it more interesting. So in order to keep the attention, I like to have a full screen and then a half screen. I kind of cut between them. So that's why you see these kind of like 2 bars on V1 and V2 stacked. The top one is me full screen. The bottom one is me half screen. Now, some of the times you see, if you're looking straight across, a blank space, like there aren't any clips. So what I did was I deleted the full screen and I kept the half screen, but I had to move it above the images because I want to have this consistent line where my video cuts off. If I move this below, you'll see what happens. All the images are different sizes, so it kind of messes up. I'd have to crop each image. So this is, if you're looking at this and you're like, where is his like A-roll footage for some of these pockets? I'm just moving it above the B-roll, so on the split screen, it makes more sense. Okay, these are like some tactical things that I promised I wouldn't go through, but here we are. So you already watched the video. Now what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna do it without sound first. Or I'll do it with sound, but it's gonna come through my mic. It's gonna be like lower quality sound. So we'll watch the beginning here.
Something crazy is happening with Stanley Cup.
So what I wanna do is I'm gonna mute all of the sound that isn't my voice first, because I just want you to get a sense for how the pacing looks to go from script to video. So this should be just my voice and just the like A-roll voice of the news clips.
Something crazy is happening with Stanley Cups. You ever seen one of these?
Stanley Cup.
Stanley Cup.
Stanley Cup, racking up 6.7 billion views.
This 40-ounce Stanley Quencher has become the Louis
Okay, I guess the music's on, but
Vuitton of drinkware. It's a status symbol. New releases are selling out in seconds. People are flipping them for hundreds on eBay.
so you can start to see like the pacing is pretty good as is, but if I did it with no music and no sound, it wouldn't hold your attention. The audio is critical. And like, if there's a piece of this that I'm worst at, even though I used to make music, it's picking the right audio track to match the BPM that I'm delivering the vocals with. It doesn't seem like that matters. Like if you go on TikTok and you watch somebody who's making short form and they use the same song over and over and over, some of them for fast clips, some are fast videos they make, some of them for slow, you'll realize like those videos don't do that well because the audio doesn't match the vocal pocket. And you really need the audio to match the vocal pocket. This is something that we'll talk about in the course. We can do like a whole module on it. But also it comes with like training your ear and taste a little bit. So it takes me a while to find the right song to match and to put on top of that to do sound effects, which create even more dynamic nature of the video. And on top of that, I like to time the beat drop with like interesting points in the video. So it like creates this tension and then the beat hits at the same time. And it's like this, this euphoric moment in the video. All of that is like a learned skill. So I'm just going to mute that for now. But if you just listen to, and I'll go through that at the end, but if you just listen to the delivery,
something crazy is happening with Stanley Cups. You ever seen one of these?
The pacing does make sense. So I'll go through it without the music first. So his first line, something crazy is happening with Stanley Cups. This was just like, I did a slow zoom at the beginning. I like to start with full screen because I think when it's half screen or B-roll, people like scroll right by. So I like to give them a shot of my face right away. And I don't like to overwhelm on the beginning. So the first 3 seconds is important to show a little bit of what you're talking about, either through text or graphics. And so here I chose to do a 3 picture sequence, like with a sound effect that I'll add later, but just showing the Stanley Cups. Then I cut to what I talked about before is like the news clips, which I think are really powerful. This is the first time I ever did this. Now it only works if like there is a topic that's being covered in the news, but
Stanley Cup, racking up 6.7 billion views.
so this is just me going to YouTube, searching Stanley Cup, finding the news clips, taking the YouTube, going to a program called Downy. I'm pasting the YouTube link into Downy. Downy is stripping out the MP4 from YouTube so that I can have it in here. And then I'm just pasting it to the right of my timeline. I'm going through and finding the right moment that I want. Now, again, it takes a little bit of taste to know like to know when to cut it. Obviously, when they say Stanley, you want to cut it, but like knowing what to piece together, that takes a little bit of practice. But it took me a while it took me 30 minutes to kind of get the sequence where I wanted, but I think it adds a lot of power to it because it's not just me talking at you, it's kind of this like other perspective, these other angles.
Stanley Cup, racking up 6.7 billion views.
And as we go, I want to see like how long. So it started at 7:17. So here we're 7 seconds in. I did the first line intro in the news compilation. We're 7 seconds in. If you're interested in Stanley Cups, I pretty much have got you hooked so far, especially because like this clip of this girl walking with like athletic chairs to go obviously like sit.
6.7 billion views.
She's like sitting outside a store. It says cup craze. This clip is just perfect for this. And I just got lucky that I found it. Sometimes you find the clips and then make these videos around it. I just found this as I was looking. So we'll keep going.
This 40-ounce
So again, this 40-ounce Stanley Quencher, it was important that I showed what it was. So that explicit. The first little sequence was a little fast. Those clips are just talking about Stanley, but you don't actually know what it is. So this is the first time I'm like putting the cup on the screen for a while. And I like to pick this sounds really stupidly obvious, but I like to pick visuals that match what I'm saying exactly. So like my mind kind of works in metaphors. Like I like putting punny stuff in there. Like I'll put a GIF that like kind of means what I'm saying and like add humor. These videos go so fast that when you're not making them, you don't realize people don't have the time to think deeply about every line because it's just like, it's like the next. So that's why it's helpful to put graphics exactly mapping to what you're talking about. So in this case, I put the 40-ounce Stanley Cup on there for that's 2 seconds. That's a long time for that one graphic to be on there. So I wanted to reinforce that. Then what I like to do, the same way I talked about the script, how you want to vary like long lines and short lines, you kind of want to do that with visuals as well. So if you have a visual that's kind of sitting on there for a minute or sitting on there for a couple seconds, then the next thing you want to come back with is like a quick hitter. You want to keep that variation. So here I did.
has become the Louis Vuitton.
Has become the Louis Vuitton of drinkware. I did this like fast sequence where I just found a bunch of clips or a bunch of pictures on Google Images of Louis Vuitton, like random random brand photos or logos, or that's Bernard Arnault, Rihanna, like just random. It's almost so fast you're not even going to recognize who's in it, but it's just like hitting you with Louis Vuitton in a bunch of different ways to kind of reinforce that concept. And then the last picture, which I think is gold, is this Louis Vuitton and Stanley Cup combined. Somebody made this online. I mean, it's a perfect picture. Like this was the picture that was the thumbnail for Instagram. And that's another small tip is on Instagram, you want to make the thumbnail something that resonates with what you're talking about, because when someone shares it in the DMs on Instagram, the thing that comes up is the thumbnail. And so if the thumbnail is compelling, you got them. And so like this picture is extremely compelling because it's like Louis Vuitton and Stanley Cup, and combine that with my title, which was like, is like Stanley Cups are the Louis Vuitton of drinkware or something like that. I mean, it was just a home run combination. I really should spend more time thinking about the title and thumbnail, just like on YouTube. Like go figure, YouTube, the most important thing is title and thumbnail. On Instagram, it's the same exact thing. Nobody thinks about that like that. I'm starting to. So this is a tip. If you're listening, you should start to think about that. The thumbnail does matter, especially when people share. I'm turning the sound back on.
It's a status symbol.
So I like to use these like big text letters every once in a while just to like change the visual angle. The captions, which I'll show on the final version, are yellow. I guess maybe I'll just go to the final version now. I kind of mapped the audio differently on this one, so it was easier to listen to, but the captions are yellow. So sometimes I like to change the visual field, add these white captions with a little bit of a glow. I make these in Figma. I just go to Figma, have a text, like literally I type a word, change the text, change the font. I use Akira expanded, and then I just like double it and make the bottom layer 60% transparent with like a layer blur. Super simple, group it together. It just gives this like glow effect. And these are like images that I'm just copying on and timing with the words when I say them. So we'll keep going.
Status symbol. New releases are selling out in seconds.
Again, new releases selling out in seconds. You want to use visuals of like Black Friday mayhem. Moms are just tackling each other trying to get these cups. Like this is just a perfect video for this. And again, I'm hunting, trying to find these. You don't always get the perfect ones, but
people are flipping them for hundreds
of dollars on eBay. So I found a screenshot on eBay showing like $2,000 cups. This obviously would never sell. Like this is what was on eBay, but like no one's gonna buy this cup for $1,000. But the picture alone, just shown in like a second, really does make it compelling that like, wow, something crazy is happening.
on eBay. Stanley, the company, 10x its revenue.
That was just like the Stanley logo with the 10x over it.
Its revenue in
And this was like a clip from that CNBC video I talked about where they did a lot of the work to make the B-roll. So like you could argue, you know, if you're watching this from CNBC, like I'm sorry, you could argue that it's kind of BS that like I can export a YouTube video that CNBC spent like weeks making with all of this from scratch video design, graphic design, animation. And I just take that, rip it, take a clip from it and put it into mine. You could argue that like that's kind of bullshit, but like that is how the internet works. Like there would never be a way for CNBC to be able to track every single person that's using a fragment of their video. You know, I might, in this total 90-second video, I might use like 10 seconds of total B-roll, 2 seconds at a time from CNBC's thing. Should I credit them in the caption? Probably. Do I do it every single time? No, because in this one I could have, but I'm using sources from all over. So I think it's just one of those things on the internet, like CNBC does the work to make a piece. I take it, I amplify the message. Somebody takes mine, literally copy pastes it, reposts it, just reacts, which is like just looking at it and doing nothing. So that's just the way the internet works. You can't really get mad about that. So because of that, I'm just like looking for the best possible way to tell the story. And you got to hope that like things will even out at the end. So anyway, I'm using this graphic, which showed their revenue growing. I thought it was pretty cool way they did that.
But the real question is, how'd they do it?
So that first head fake. So, but the real question is how'd they do it? I just use this AI GIF of him being like, how'd they do that? A lot of times, like these GIFs, I think they're funny to myself. I don't know if they actually add value. Maybe people chuckle if they get the reference. How many like 13-year-olds like Stanley Cups are going to know Allen Iverson? I would say none, but I think it's funny. The thing though is he's saying how you do that, but the caption is what really sells it. But that caption is below the fold on Instagram and TikTok. Like the apps have like the like and the description and like my profile name are all covering that. So it doesn't actually add to it. In this case, maybe I should have split screened it, but so I use that.
How did Stanley Cups go from a construction?
So this again was from the CNBC video. Again, really good. Like this was an old Stanley ad. So I guess I could have got the source video, but I just took it from theirs because I had that already. So it went from a thermos to the dream Christmas gift. Now I'll play the music in a second, but like the climax of this video is right here where this girl screams and the beat drops.
I got a Stanley!
It's a wild story. So in 2019,
So I thought that was so funny. Like, I got a Stanley, it's a wild story, bang, and the beat just dropped. I thought that was so funny. Like, if I was a DJ, that's like a hilarious drop. And I'm just trying to like infuse these little special moments. Because I'm going crazy over here making these videos for 4 or 5 hours a day, but also people just take away that one second. That's the sauce that separates you from everybody else, is that one little moment, that one little animation, that one little thing that you added in there. There's a point later where I'm like with a twist and I just like twisted the video as I said it. It's just those little things that people are just like, that's class. Like they just see that and they just think dope, like that's dope. And that's what I'm after. So if you're trying to go quantity over quality, you're not going to do those things. But for me, like, I think those are kind of the things that make a signature Kallaway video, is you just don't know what's going to be in there. So this is one of those moments. So she screams. I think it's hilarious. Keep going. So this is where we get to the context. Again, this is from the CNBC video, this like little quencher. I could have made this, but they made it quicker.
but this group of mom bloggers.
So this was from their video. Also, I could have found this on Google, just searching for these mom bloggers. Just did like an image compilation of them, a couple images. This was from their video as well. Again, shout out. Sick video. I wonder how many. I actually should go back and look, because their video probably got like 100,000 views and this got 6 million impressions. Obviously, they're on YouTube and they're monetizing, and I'm on Instagram and still eating ramen noodles. So I would say good on them, but that just shows like it doesn't really matter if somebody's, taking this source video. So we keep going. Throughout, I'm using these little zooms. There's like 3 types of zooms that I like to use. One is like a slow, nothing to fully zoom, just like a slow, gradual zoom. One is like a 3 or 4 frame zoom, which is like nothing happens, and then it's like it like kind of like zooms up as I'm saying a word. And the other one is kind of in between. So I vary between those. I don't like to have myself on the screen for too long with zero movement. I just think it's visually just not interesting enough. And so if you see something with no graphics overlaid, like this little clip right here has no graphics overlaid, there's a zoom in there.
Knew they were making a huge
right there. Huge mistake. As I'm saying, like huge, it's zooming in. Just adds like a little bit. That with the caption is enough to keep their attention. Again, I'm just like playing around, like just trying to create some visual interest in some of this. Like if you're making videos where it's like you in a room and you're reviewing a product, or it's like you at the desk and it's like 10 seconds long and you're just cutting B-roll, it's easy to make those videos. And I'm going to start making some of those videos, because it creates this like lifestyle aesthetic, which I want, and it's way easier to make. These are hard to make because you got to fill the canvas for 90 seconds with like interesting stuff to keep somebody in, to keep them interested. So we'll keep going.
Stanley had to make them.
Oh, there's the twist thing. Let's go.
1,000 cups with a twist.
With a twist. That's sauce. That's class. That's Leo Messi. That's as Roberto says, that's the maestro. Like that's just like, I think that's what adds a little sauce to it. We'll keep going.
Make them pastel colors. Those 5,000 cups sold out in 5 days and completely changed their philosophy on design. But it gets even better. A few months ago, Stanley had the burning car moment.
A lot of this is the same stuff. Like if you watch to this point, it's like, oh, he's doing the same thing over and over. He's varying between full screen and half screen. He's zooming on the full screens. He's using the couple different source videos to fill the split screen. He's using images and GIFs and memes and stuff that match to what he's saying. Like, yeah, that's all it is. The sauce and the special, what makes it go viral is you got to be second nature with that stuff so that you can get one out every couple days. That's what makes it tough. You want to watch these and learn, and like, this is my 250th video. Like, you have to rehearse these repetitions over and over and over so that when the Stanley Cup things comes across your desk, you can rip a video in 4 hours instead of it taking you a week to plan. So that's the whole thing, is like, there is simplicity in the individual elements, but packaging them together and being able to implement them quickly, that's where the real skill comes in, I think.
It's a video of a woman's...
This is like, I took this video from TikTok and I just cut it down.
With her Stanley Cup being the only thing that survived, with ice still in it. It went ballistic on TikTok. 94 million views. And the Stanley's...
So it's that over and over, basically. And I want to go to the end, and then I'm going to show you, we're getting a little long here. If you're listening, 40 minutes, hopefully this is valuable. Again, like, comment down below, DM me, message me, email me, like, let me know if this is valuable. My email is kallaway@wavylabs.co. Send me an email if you like this and you gained a lot from it, and if you want me to include different stuff next time, format it differently, shoot me an email and I will definitely do that. This end part, we didn't really talk about as much, but the CEO from Stanley I actually think I didn't have this in the script. I think I just like, off the dome included this as I was recording, but the CEO from Stanley used to be the VP of marketing at Crocs, and Crocs is like one of the craziest brand stories of all time in the last like decade. So I wanted to include that in there. He's the one that came on the response video on TikTok and like said he was going to buy her the car, but he's so savvy with the influencer partnerships. He just gets it. So I wanted to include him in there. This is him.
CMO at Crocs. He replied saying the company would buy her new car. Viral again. And that $30,000 car was worth millions in impressions. The key here is that Stanley has become masters of opportunistic virality and limited edition collabs. And if I'm them or any other brand, I'm leaning even heavier.
That's like a Kris Jenner throwing the chips in, like just a funny pop culture reference. Again, like I'm cult hopping off Kris Jenner.
Rare and exclusive. Somebody gets to be the status symbol in every category. And for drinkware, Stanley's king.
So I want to show you what I did at the end. Because I copied some of it over, but didn't all copy over. So this is what I'm talking about, is making the last line a banger. Somebody gets to be the luxury player in every category, whatever I said. I'm like quickly running through people's favorite brands. So like Rolex, Porsche, Travis Scott, Nikes, Ace of Spades, Birkin bags. Like I'm just going through them. People are recognizing them.
In every category. And for drinkware, Stanley's king.
And then I just dropped the Stanley with a crown coming on it with a sound effect. And yeah, that's like all it takes is like, people are watching so much mundane content. If you can just take an elevated approach to it, it really will stand out. I want to go back through one more time, and I'm just going to play, I'm going to mute my audio, but I'm going to play with the sound effects in the song. I just want you to listen to how dynamic it is with the sound effects. I added white noise there to make it more like nostalgic. I added that like crowd noise, cash register, whip in, little whip there. So I do most of the sound design at the beginning because it's tough to do it for the whole thing. One thing I wanted to mention is, I'll play that again, but one thing I wanted to mention is you can see I cut out little sections of the song. I like when the song's playing, it stops, climactic moment, hit him with the beat drop. I love doing that. And so that's why there's a cutout. I'll play this part again. I just think that's so hilarious. Like, that is so funny. This is a good beat pocket. Like, you can kind of head nod to this. I put a little Rick Ross ad lib in there. So it's just like, I'm a painter. I'm just adding little things. That's what you want to do is you have your A-roll, you have your story, which we talked about. You have your music, which complements the story well, and then you just want to add little icing, little dollops here and there, little bits, little icing on the cake, and together it comes together really, really well. And I'll say, like, when you edit it, you're gonna be the biggest critic. You don't need to do what I'm doing. Like this took me like 4 hours to edit. When you're starting out, you're not gonna have the skills. I don't even really have the skills still. You're not gonna have 4 hours to do it. Don't spend 4 hours doing this. Spend 2 hours, make it as good as you can, throw it out. Like, and then by throw it out, I mean post it. Then the next time you're going to spend 2.5 hours. The next time, pretty soon you're going to like fall in love with the craft of doing it. And it's really just piecing a puzzle together. So I know this is about 45 minutes long. That's all I got for you on this one. Hopefully this was helpful. Like if I was starting out and I watched this, I would have picked up at least like 10 little things that I could incorporate on my own. So if you like this, please share it with somebody. If you liked it and you think it'd be valuable, if you're a brand marketer, if you're a creator, if you think about content all the time and you need it for your business, hopefully this was helpful. I'll do a lot more of these. Shoot me a message with what you want me to include next time. Peace.